Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Albert Einstein once said, "Any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction." He might as well have been talking about what happened in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night Jesus was arrested. Amid a crowd of soldiers and others who have come out with swords and clubs expecting violence, Jesus moves in the opposite direction. Amid disciples who seek to defend Jesus with violence of a sword, Jesus moves in the opposite direction. Amid the stress and pressure of a difficult trial, Jesus stood with courage and moved in the opposite direction. Today, we wrap up this week of looking at what I'm calling often overlooked miracles. Those miracles of Jesus that we don't hear about very often for one reason or another. Today, we want to talk about one that we might have heard of before, but we probably haven't ever given it a whole lot of thought. It's an odd little story tucked away in the Gospel of Luke as part of Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's a small detail, but when they come to arrest Jesus, one of his disciples takes a sword and fights back. He must not have been a very good swordsman, because all he succeeds in doing is cutting off the ear of one of the slaves of the high priest. The Gospel of John tells us that this slave's name was Malchus. Jesus immediately puts a stop to the attempt at fighting to defend him, and then he reached out and healed Malchus's ear. Then they led Jesus away. So what do we do? What do we make of this little miracle that we've never paid much attention to before? Well, first, Jesus is telling us that violence is not his way. Neither is it to be the way of the church or Christ's followers. God's people are called to actions of love and compassion for others, not to violence or harm. The kingdom of God is not advanced by violence, and the sword has no place in the church's arsenal. And while we are learning that, all this also means that Jesus has come to the moment of his own accord. No one is forcing him to go through with what is before him. They don't need clubs and swords to compel him to go. No, love compels him. Love for you and for me. He goes to meet violence with love. And in the end, love wins. A second thing we might think about in this little miracle is that even in the middle of all that is happening to and around Jesus, even as he faces arrest and death itself, it doesn't stop him from his purpose to heal and redeem. You might think if ever there were a time when Jesus might be a little self-focused and distracted from his compassion for others, this would be it. But no. In spite of all that is happening, in spite of all that is just before him, Jesus reaches out in compassion and heals Malchus. The disciples reacted with violence, but Jesus stands there with courage and compassion, true to himself, true to his mission. And then finally, I'm left with a question. What happened to Malchus? I had never thought before to look at this story from his viewpoint. Here he was, a slave of the high priest, trusted enough to be sent out to arrest Jesus, so he clearly was on the high priest's side in all this. And then his ear is cut off, and the very man he had come out to scoff at for claiming to be the Son of God heals him. The very man he had come out to scorn and arrest reaches out to him with compassion and care. How did that change Malchus? How does it change us? You see, I think anytime Jesus acts in our lives, we are changed. We can't encounter Jesus, his love, his compassion, his care without being changed. And so I wonder about Malchus. What did he think when he got home that night and over the next few days as he watched what happened with Jesus? Did he become a follower? Is that why his name is remembered? We don't know. What we do know is that in Jesus we have someone who moves in the opposite direction from the world in order to save the world. And he invites us to move with him away from death into life. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.